and welcome to this episode of Legally Brum. Today we have with us Natalie Kearney from St Philip's Chambers. Welcome, Natalie.
Hello.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am a first six pupil. That means that I'm not taking instructions yet, but will be from the 1st of April. And I am a graduate of Cardiff University and Leeds University.
So can you tell us a bit about the pupillage process? You have to do a certain amount of mini pupillages, is that right? Or what's the process? Could you just explain a bit about it?
You do the bar course rather than the LPC. That's only 12 months long. After that you start making applications, although you can apply earlier. You apply through what used to be called Old Pass. It's now the Pupillage Gateway. You can apply to 12 chambers on the gateway, and there are usually 5 set questions that all chambers will ask that take part in the gateway, which are things like what skills do you have that make you best suited for a career at the bar, and that kind of thing. Why a career at the bar? Why not be a solicitor, for example? And then some chambers will put additional questions on there as well. Some of those will have a write a short advice, or what do you think of the Human Rights Act, that kind of thing. Mini pupillage wise, there isn't a set requirement.
Okay.
You don't have to do a number of mini pupillages, but you probably should. You definitely should. So they suggest 3 to 5. If you start doing about 10, it looks a bit desperate. So some chambers make mini pupillage as a part of their recruitment process.
Yeah.
So you can't apply for a pupillage there unless you've done a mini pupillage.
And like a VAC scheme?
Yeah, like a VAC scheme. But there are very few of those because the mini pupillage spaces are so few and far between. I would say do 3 to 5, one in each area of law, at sets that you want to apply to. And also, if you're getting mini pupillage offers, because they are so few and far between, it's normally a good sign that you would be a candidate that might get pupillage in the long run.
But you know, like you said, that there are, like if you apply for more than 10, it looks desperate.
Mini pupillages, yeah.
How do they know that you've applied for, like...
Okay, so you can do more than 10, that's not a problem. It's when you do your application forms, they will ask you about your experiences, and some will ask for a CV. Some that you can apply to outside of the gateway have their own application forms where you fill in how many mini pupillages you've done. If you list everything you've done and you've done 10, then you're going to look a bit desperate. If you do 10, which some people do, you don't have to list them all.
Okay.
So if you do, let's say you did 3 in crime, 3 in family, 3 commercial down in London, and then you're applying to a set in Manchester that does mixed common law, you wouldn't necessarily put down that you went to London and did 3 commercial mini pupillages because it's not really relevant. Or you might say, well, I did 1 commercial, 1 family, 1 crime. So just so you can go in and say, I tried it, didn't like it, that's why I know this is what I want to do.
And then the gateway, so I guess, is it like a pass-fail thing with the questions? So if you get through all those 5 questions, then you can apply to anything?
No, so basically you fill in the form, you make up to 12, always fill the 12, don't waste your application forms. Then they print it off the other end of the chambers. There's no pass-fail. A panel will be selected within chambers usually. They'll do what's called a paper sift. They'll select people from the paper sift, first sift, that they want to invite for interview. There will be criteria within chambers that they'll assess it against. So it all depends on how you come across on paper. There won't be a set response they're looking for, unfortunately. So you don't really know where you send your application off if you're going to get anywhere with it. And it's not, there won't be a legal problem normally. There might be, like I say, an extra question on there, but the 5 set questions are generally skills-based. Your experience, your personal skills, tell us something exciting about yourself, that kind of thing.
Did you know you wanted to be a barrister, like, as soon as you started studying law?
I think I was 11. Yeah, no, a lot of people aren't that obsessed, and you don't have to be that obsessed. I knew that I wanted to because I liked arguing, and a history teacher took me to one side at school and said, have you considered being a lawyer? Have you thought about being a lawyer? I was like, actually, no, that sounds like a good job. So yeah, I knew from that stage. Then I set up a debating club, and all of my applications and my subjects I chose based on what I wanted to do at university.
I feel like because it's such a competitive area, I think you have to know really well in advance that that's what you want to do to really prepare yourself.
Yeah, the earlier you start, the easier I think it is to get the things that you need to pass the tick boxes.
Because even in with training contracts and solicitors, there's the Silex you can do, you can be a paralegal and qualify that way.
Apprentice.
There's so many different ways to qualify, whereas as a barrister it's there's this many there's this many places, but there's this many of you. It's so competitive.
Yeah. So in terms of your mini pupillages that you did, how many did you applied to? How many interviews did you have? Tell us about the recruitment process.
So for mini pupillages, that's just apply as to many as you want. I think I did 5 in total. Pupillages, I sent in 3 figures numbers of paper applications. We'll say 120 and make it conservative. And interviews, counting as separate instance, first and second rounds, it was I think I worked out about 50 interviews. That's over 4 years, and in my defence, I got one in the end. But some people are lucky; they do it the first time they apply. I started applying in the final year of university, not expecting to get anything. I did it mainly because I couldn't have afforded to do the bar course.
So expensive.
Without a scholarship. So, if you're applying for a scholarship, you need to put an application form into one of the 4 Inns of Court, and so you have to look good on paper. So you start applying for your mini pupillages and that kind of thing.
In terms of mini pupillage interviews, what kind of questions were you asked? What were the difficult aspects of them?
As a mini pupillage interview, you don't really get. You just do them on paper. It's a bit like a VAC scheme.
Yeah.
So you don't get interviewed for a mini pupillage normally.
You do get interviewed for a VAC scheme though, don't you?
Yeah, there's an application process.
So literally, for a mini pupillage, you just do an application. There we go.
On the form. Wow.
Put a form in, put a letter in with your CV, say please give me a space, and then you tag along to chambers if they like you on paper.
So your paper has to be outstanding, pretty much.
I didn't know that. I thought you still had to have an interview. Yeah.
Yeah, no mini pupillages. Generally, there's no interview. I think some sets might do. I don't know any off the top of my head that interview for mini pupillages. Yeah, but pupillages. Yes.
So what about your pupillage? What about your pupillage interviews?
So you get some weird and wonderful questions. Some sets, like St Philip's, for example, we have a pre-interview question evening. So everyone gets invited along to do. Essentially, everyone gets us the same 3 questions on the same evening. For example, I think I was asked about the morals of zoos. Should you have zoos?
Oh wow.
I know friends that had interviews with similar questions. So somebody got asked about whether rats should have human rights. So that kind of thing. And they aren't really interested in what you say so much as how you say it.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking things through?
Yeah.
How do you present an argument? Rule of 3 is always a good one, please, for interviews. I'm going to have 3 points. The first being zoos are wonderfully educational. The second being in the wild these animals will die. The third being they raise important funds for conservation projects in Africa.
Yeah.
And you then talk off your 3 points. So it's about logic and that kind of thing.
I couldn't think of stuff like that on the spot.
I'd be like, yeah, they should, I don't know.
Yeah, so that's like the weird and wonderful questions, and then you'll get your usual questions about your application form. Examples of what you've put in your form and why you think you're a good advocate. My year abroad came up, my friend's rabbit probably came up. They at the interview stage, they want to know that they like you as a person.
Yeah.
Some sets will have, in fact most sets now I think have first and second round interviews. First round will generally be your application form and possibly a legal problem that you'll be given usually at the interview. If they're saving a legal problem that you get in advance, it's normally for your second round. So some sets you have to write an advice, for example. I interviewed at a London set of chambers that you had to write an advice for a week in advance, send it off, and then you got grilled in the interview about your advice. And also a London set that I was at, you had a debate. So you turned up 15 minutes before your interview time, you prepared your question, you go into the room, you start your interview by debating the candidate that was in before you.
Oh wow.
So they're finishing their interview off, you walk in, you have your debate against that person, they stand up and leave, you carry on with your interview.
Oh wow.
That was probably one of the weirdest experiences of
That
my
is weird.
pupillage interviews.
It's kind of like Hunger Games.
How do they
It felt like the Hunger Games.
How do they actually prepare you for all of this when you're doing your BPTC?
They don't. I mean, there isn't really you can do mock interviews. I think some providers will do mock interviews. Nottingham did it as part of their pre-bar course, sort of come to our provider. Now it's Nottingham Law School, sorry, for my bar course, which is why I know that. The Inns run mock interviews. They're probably the best source of help. Some, I think, local chambers will generally offer assistance with mock interviews. If you are a member of an inn, you can normally get a mentor. So I'm a member of Inner Temple. I have a mentor through that who helped me with my application form. I send it off and he'd proofread it and say, have you thought about mentioning this that you did? Or you go and meet them for a coffee and say, what sort of questions should I prepare for?
Coming on to inns, can you explain how many they are and what distinguishes each one from one another?
So there are 4 inns of court. You have to be a member of one of the inns to become a barrister. They're in charge of your education, technically. They are wonderful organisations that you really should get involved with if you're going to be a barrister. And they all have a big pot of money, some more than others. They offer scholarships for the bar course. Also for the GDL, if you are converting to law, or the CLP, although I'm not entirely sure what that is. It might be an old version of GDL. Pops up on the website. So you can get funding through them. They organise events. They'll have events about how hard it is to get a career at the bar, trying to make sure that you know what you're getting in for, and how hard it is to actually get a pupillage or get tenancy, because it's a big financial risk to take the bar course. And then they'll, like I say, you have mentoring through that. You have Speaking Fit in the Temple now. They have the Pegasus Access Scheme. So if you are from an underprivileged background, they will put you in touch with chambers that will do mini pupillages. So you can apply through them. It's called, I think it's PASS for short. And they'll put you in touch with chambers and say, we'll fund or partially fund a mini pupillage for you. Because what you don't, if you are applying for mini pupillages, if you spend 3 days in London and you're not from London and you have nowhere to stay, you can't necessarily afford to do a mini pupillage to put on your CV to make the application. So the inns help with that kind of thing as well.
Tell us something interesting about life at the bar.
So to qualify for the bar, you have to do 12 dining sessions. That's what it's called. So now they have residential weekends as well, so you can do 5
like
sessions.
A holiday.
I mean, there's work involved, but there normally is a weekend away. But one of the best things for the dinners is you get to put your gown on, waltz around in some big wooden hall like you're in Hogwarts. Really, it's great fun.
So can you tell us a day in the life as a pupil?
So there isn't really an average day. Depends what area of law you're doing. So I do commercial specialist. Most of my days are in chambers. Most of my pupil supervisors' work has been in Birmingham. So we go to courts probably more than the average commercial barrister. He's probably in court 3 times a week on average for various short hearings. We'd have a few trials up and down the country, be in Manchester or be in Leeds or be in Leicester. My criminal fellow pupils, they are in court every day. Family pupils, again, I think they're in court most days. I do quite a lot of written work, written advice as practice. If you're doing family or crime, you don't necessarily do as much written work, or at least advice, anyway. They'll be doing pleadings and that kind of thing. But it's different sorts of work. If you are, I mean, specialist pupillages are quite new, I think. So I think we're St Philip's first set of specialist pupils. If you are doing more general pupillage, I imagine you'd be split depending on what your supervisor did. But there isn't really an average day. Turn up early before your supervisor. Make sure that you look keen. Do the work that's asked of you. Leave when the work's done. I haven't had too many horrific late nights, to be honest. My main supervisor, is the head of the Wellbeing Committee for St Philip's, so he's very keen on making sure that I am well rested and understand that there should be a work-life balance. I have friends that have done pupillages that are more intense, who would start at 6 o'clock in the morning and be there until midnight. I have a friend that used to go and set the alarm off in the morning when he went into work because he was super keen.
Wow.
So it does depend where you are and the sort of work you're doing, I think, but generally most sets are quite keen to make sure their pupils don't overwork themselves and try and establish some kind of balance.
How long is pupillage?
12 months, so shorter than a training contract.
And then oh wow.
It's split into 2, so you do your first 6 following somebody around, learning what they do, drafting advices. You can technically take work in your own name if it's a noting brief, which is essentially you go along to a hearing, you say nothing, and you just take a note of what happens. I haven't had any of those, but one of my fellow pupils has. And then in your second 6 months, so mine's the 1st of April, for example, you start taking instructions in your own name.
That's so exciting.
Hopefully nice, easy things. But yeah, you go off on your own with your wig and gown, pop into a court and give it a go. And then in the end of your second 6 months, they vote in chambers whether to keep you on or not.
And what if you don't get kept on? I'm not saying you will, sorry, that's not,
Don't do this to
I
me.
mean, that just came out
Jinx
completely
me.
wrong. I mean,
wood.
as in, say, if a pupil doesn't get kept on.
So there's different things that can happen. So it's very glamorous, it's called squatting.
You just don't leave.
Which way you just don't leave. You stay. So Chamber says, we don't really want you as a tenant, or there isn't the work for a tenant, or you think you're very good, we'll help you find somewhere else. But for now, you squat, so you just stay in Chambers. They don't have to clerk you necessarily. You'll pick up whatever work there is that nobody else wants, I suppose. You might have to squat because they might delay the vote. That happened to a friend of mine as well. So you'd be a squatter whilst you wait to hear if
I
you've
love
got
the
tenancy.
terminology.
I know.
It does sound a bit odd, doesn't it? I'm squatting here for the next 2 months. Or you can do, some sets make you do a third six. So a lot of criminal sets, I say a lot, some criminal sets make you do a third six by just general nature. You don't do 12 months, you do 18 months. Just because crime is struggling, as everyone will know. If you don't get taken on by your original set during your first 12-month pupillage, you might do a third six at a different set. And they normally get advertised in the summer as you're finding out whether the vote's gone your way. Or if you get kept on, you become a tenant, or you might apply for tenancy somewhere else.
Have you, obviously you worked at Shakespeare Martineau, have you found working in private practice compared to Chambers is a big difference, would you say?
Massive difference, and also in expectations. So I think a lot of people go to the bar, they go straight to the bar. So they haven't really been employees. And I once got told by a barrister that barristers are good barristers because they'd be terrible employees. Because you're self-employed, unless you work for the CPS or some of the in-house positions you can get. So you don't, if you're a self-employed barrister, so imagine I'm not a pupil, I don't have to be in Chambers at any particular time, I don't have to get home at any particular time, I can work from home if I want to, if I'm in court in Manchester, I just head straight to Manchester, I don't have to come into Chambers.
Just lots of freedom.
Lots of freedom, basically you do what you want, you're your own boss really. If you don't enjoy working in the morning, you rather get up at lunchtime and you work through till midnight instead. It's, you fit in what fits with you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Unless you're in court, in which case you do what the court says. But
Like, no, I'm not coming.
I'm not coming in at that time. I'm not getting out of bed before 11 o'clock.
11
What's he
o'clock,
talking
yeah.
about?
So why did you become a barrister and not a solicitor advocate?
Partly the freedom we talked about, being self-employed, want to be my own boss. Partly because I enjoy advocacy quite a lot. I did a lot of mooting at university, international and national, and although solicitor advocates have higher rights, it's not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
And I think having now worked in both sides of it, I don't miss not time recording every 6 minutes of my life. And it's mainly the freedom, and also I get to wear a big gown and call people my learned friend.
So do you have any tips for people that are currently looking for mini pupillages or just going through the process now?
Aside from the obvious that they'll all have heard, so be interesting, have done something that's different, whether it's a rabbit with a bow tie or lived abroad. I would say, I know that there were issues with the pupillage gateway this year, as there usually are. If you're applying by the pupillage gateway, never, ever, ever, ever leave it to the night before. So I know this year that it crashed on deadline day and there was an extension of 3 days over the weekend, but they don't always extend the deadline because it crashes. So apply in plenty of time, print it off, your paper application, proofread it and read it out to yourself. That's the easiest way to spot if there's a problem with spelling or grammar or it just doesn't make sense. I once talked about being a great believer. I think I might just been Bieber rather than a great believer. So that's the kind of thing you want to spot. And I know that now when this goes out it will be interview time. So I have a habit of speaking quickly, if you've not noticed, and a lot. If you are in an interview, get a drink of water. When you're asked a question that you don't know the answer to, take a sip of water, and then it just gives you a minute to breathe. Also make sure it's your own water, because I went into an interview once, didn't pour myself a glass of water, panicked and thought I need a minute to think about this, went to pick up the glass of water on the table. It was the previous candidate's water and the entire panel panicked and dove towards me. It wasn't the best impression I think I've ever made. Make sure it's your own water. Good start. And when you leave an interview, write down all the questions that you were asked in that interview. So
I used to do that with my training contract interviews.
It's the best thing to do because then you can prepare for the next time, because there are only so many questions in the world that they can ask, other than Arzu's moral, that sort of thing. But generally, what skills do you have? Or the trickiest ones are the ethical questions, but you can't really prepare for those.
Can you give an example of one?
if you are in court and your witness is in the box and they pull a piece of paper out of their pocket and start talking about this piece of paper, what do you do?
What would you do?
It's a good question. What would you do, viewers?
Thank you, Natalie, for joining us on this episode of Life at the Bar and talking about your pupillage experience.
Thank you for having me.
Shall we go to the bar now?
Yeah.